Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Chapter 13A, where we have been talking about protozoa, the animal-like protists. Today, we are going to quickly go through Chromista, the plant-like protists, mostly. Just like with the protozoa, there are exceptions. And Chromista is a rather new category. They created it in 1981, and it had not yet gotten into textbooks by the time I was through with school. So yes, I am old, and I had to figure all out what a Chromista was because they took things from all kinds of places and stuffed them together into here. So here we are. Okay, we're going to look primarily by going at the characteristics of most chromists. We are not going to be able to say everything there is. There are people that study these things for their life. However, we're going to give you a crash course today of one day of chromistas. Okay, if you are looking at the pictures, what you'll first notice is that there is a huge diversity of appearance. Where with the protozoa, you noticed a lot of them kind of look the same. With chromists, there are huge differences in appearance. However, most of them are unicellular. And there are a few types that live in colonies, which basically means the individuals live in a group together, and the different individuals will have different tasks. Okay? There are such huge diversities that we're only going to be able to cover some of these things. And a lot of the things, in some ways, are similar to protozoa. For example, some of them have flagella and so on. But we'll see. Okay, but most are unicellular. A few live in colonies. And, of course, we have to have an exception to the unicellular or colonies, and that is kelp. Kelp, although it looks like a plant, is not a plant. If you look at the center top picture, what you see are what are called holdfasts. They look like roots, but they are not roots. They do hold the kelp to the ground or to rocks and things like that, but they don't absorb nutrients or anything like that, so they simply are there holding on. Kind of like an anchor. You could see from the pictures probably why kelp is often referred to as a kelp forest. It gives the impression that it's like a forest. Kelp can grow literally to be 100 feet in length or height, however you want to think about it. Lots and lots of animals live among the kelp. It's a place where a lot of animals will have they're young because it's kind of sheltered and protected, and primarily they get in, for our country at least, they are on the west coast off by California. If you look at the bottom left, you'll see those ball-looking things. Those are what are known as pneumatocysts, and they basically are little bladders or little bags, balls, however you want to think of it, of air. The kelp actually will take air out of the water, put it into these little sacs, and that will help the kelp float and stay upright in one place. Otherwise, it would just kind of flow all over the place. Okay? So, holdfasts and pneumatocysts for the kelp. The reason kelp is an exception is because, as it looks, it is multicellular. It's not just one cell or a colony. Okay, our next characteristic is that they are autotrophic. They make their own food. This would be by photosynthesis. So pretty much all of these things will have chloroplasts, and like a plant, they will have a cell wall. So if you see your pool looking kind of like this, or you see seaweed and things like that, they actually are these chromists. Okay, your green pool is full of life. Now, although it looks nasty, there is nothing harmful about swimming in your green water. It might feel a little weird on the edges and things. It does get slippery, but it's pretty much harmless. Now, the thing that you see at the top right that looks kind of like coral is actually a type of red seaweed. The red ones live deep, deep down in the water. The only reason you can see it really in this picture is because they've brought light with them. Otherwise, it would be almost too dark to take a picture. When you get this deep, in order to have photosynthesis, the plants have to be red because the only light that really gets down there is blue, and they need to be able to absorb the blue. So when the blue light gets down there, it reflects the red and keeps the blue in order to have photosynthesis. So it's pretty slow in photosynthesis, but since that's the only light that really gets down that deep because of the way light travels through water, that's why you will find the red algae at the bottom like that. Okay. Now, if you haven't figured it out, most of these things live in water. They minimally live in a wet environment. Top left, you have kelp. On the right top, you have that beautiful seaweed. You also have algae that grow. And bottom right is something called a water mold. And if you have ever had an aquarium where a fish dies, you'll notice they start looking fuzzy, and that is the water mold, which isn't really a mold, but it reproduces kind of like one. Okay, so all that white, fuzzy looking stuff is the water mold. The rest of it's the dead fish. Okay? They do sometimes grow on plants and things like that. There are some types of molds or water molds that will grow on fruit and spoil crops that way. They are not true molds. They are chromists. Okay. Next, what you will see is that they alternate reproducing sexually and asexually. So this is called alternation of generations. It's literally one generation will reproduce asexually, then those will reproduce sexually, and it goes around and around. So if you look at this and you start at the big guy in the middle, which is the close-up, you have cell division, and it produces these creatures that are not really male-female, but they're different. They refer to them here as positive and negative. They have conjugation, which is very similar to what we talked about before. A small tube forms between them and genetic material is exchanged. Okay, that then forms this spore, which is kind of the equivalent of an egg, I guess. It goes through meiosis, which is the type of cell division, and then it releases these zoospores, which look pretty much like the other things. However, these genetically would all be different because in meiosis, remember, you have kind of a mix-up of all the DNA as they form. So all these guys are going to be different. So then they come here, and you got this again, the cell. Then it is simply going to go through mitosis, or basically like binary fission, except lots of times, and it's going to make more of the same type of thing. And eventually it's going to split open, and then you're back again to the beginning. And it just goes round and round, generation after generation. Okay, red tides. Wonderful thing here in Florida. Is caused by algae in the water. that algae is always present. However, when the temperature of the water gets up, just like in your pool, the algae will grow faster. And red tides, I believe, are made by fire algae, or a type of dinoflagellate, I do know. And they have the natural red pigment to them, kind of an orangey red. And the problem being is they release toxins into the water, and then the animals eat the algae, and the animals die, or the animals get sick, and then other animals will eat them, and they get sick and possibly die, and so on, if the count of these algae get too high. It is a normal process. It is, however, a very annoying one if you like swimming or fishing or eating seafood or going to the beach sometime. As you can see by this beautiful inlet with a lot of fish, that is not the time that it pays to live right by the water. Okay, one thing that algae do that is really cool is where you have bioluminescence of algae. This one is one of my favorites. This is of dolphins swimming. The algae, when it gets disturbed, creates bioluminescence. You can hear stories of this back from the old wooden sailing vessels. They were intrigued by it. Because as the ships would cut through the water at nighttime, you would see this trail behind you of this glowing water. And they didn't understand exactly why, but they always were intrigued by it. So you can see as the dolphins cut through the water, they disturb the algae, and the algae create bioluminescence. And it's only for a short time. And then the algae just goes back to being dark again. Okay, this type of bioluminescence is totally harmless. It does not hurt any creatures. So lots of times in California, people like to go surfing when this happens because it is so unique. And you can see the picture at the top, that's a still of the waves coming into shore. You can see how as the water crashes, it creates that bioluminescence.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown. Click the ABC7 logo.
Okay. That bioluminescence is something I would love to see personally. It just looks awesomely beautiful to me. Okay, so realize although you think of the algae in your pool as annoying because you don't want the green slimy water, just realize algae have some pretty cool stuff too. Until next time.